this is a really powerful framework to help you understand how to organize in your mind the principles that range from lean manufacturing all the way to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is MRP. And so the big idea is that on the lean end, customer pull is the primary principle. And what that means is that when the customer places a purchase order, that pulls the goods out of finished goods. And the very act of doing that is what signals each of the upstream stages of manufacturing that they need to go ahead and make the next unit. And it not only goes inside of the building, but even upstream further into the supply chain. And so on the lean side of the spectrum, what we're trying to do is have the very signal of the customer pulling the product through, let everyone in the supply chain know what needs to be done next in terms of both manufacturing works in process and supplying goods from the supply chain. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, you have the exact opposite philosophy. In the MRP side, MRP stands for Materials Requirements Planning, you're actually pushing, the manufacturer, you yourself as the manufacturer, are pushing the schedule to everybody. You take a 6-month forecast, which more specifically is a combination of your backlog, which means existing purchase orders, plus a forward-looking forecast for all of your SKUs. Put that into a big 6-month view, and then you push this giant metaphorical spreadsheet all the way upstream to your suppliers, and now they know how many parts they need to supply by which week and month. And your plant floor knows what they need to produce on any given week or month. However, it's not the customer that's pulling, it's you that's forecasting and pushing everything through the system. Now, there's a reason that these are completely diametrically opposed philosophies. Lean tends to work really well when you have relatively few SKUs, relatively few products, and you're able to set up the manufacturing directly in a linear flow without any interruptions or without any batch processes in between. Lean will absolutely break down if you have really spiky demand or if you're not able to set things up in a linear flow like that, and that's when you need to pivot to something closer to MRP. MRP is far better when you have a large numbers of SKUs, a really complex supply chain, and you need the ability to forecast well in advance because of long lead times so that you can make specialty subassemblies. So all else equal, few SKUs, high volumes, you're going to be on the lean end of the spectrum. More SKUs and relatively lower volumes, you're going to want to be on the MRP end of the spectrum, and there's lots of pragmatic trade-offs in between, such as DDMRP and the theory of constraints, that help you take off the disadvantages of whichever end you start on. Now, the middle is actually the most common place to be. It's very rare that you'll see pure lean or pure MRP. Instead, what you'll see is MRP, its limitation is that the forecast is never accurate, right? As much as you try, no matter how many hours you put in, you cannot get an accurate forecast. So instead of doing exactly what your forecast says, you put in intelligent buffers. There's different ways to do that. Sometimes you call it ABC XYZ analysis, where you're looking at things like volumes and how much inventory you want to hold. But it all comes down to intelligent buffers inside of the system so that when inevitably your forecast is wrong, you can react to that and still produce all the goods that you need to for your customers. DDMRP is a very elegant, very sophisticated way to set each of these buffers at just the right places in the supply chain. And then likewise for theory of constraints quite simply says, think of your entire factory as having one bottleneck, because by definition it does. Somewhere in your factory there is one bottleneck that limits the amount of production, and then relentlessly find that bottleneck and open it up so that you can produce more and more and more. So in the lean side, if you have spiky demand, you might need to be able to you might need to double your capacity, and the way you would go about doing that is something like applying the theory of constraints to identify the bottlenecks and loosen those up. And so in my experience, I've never seen a plant that's purely at one end or the other of the spectrum. Also, I've never seen every single SKU be at one spot. What you really typically see is, based on the different SKUs that you manufacture, you'll land at different spots on this spectrum. And so it's never wise to be dogmatic about it. Any given large enough factory will have a spread across each of these strategies.